So, I mean, you raised like two very large rounds after each other. November 2021, you raised $30 million, and now
Mhm.
it's $150 million in the last round last month.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, can you tell me what the valuation was for the $150 million round?
So actually the closing happened before, like we announced
I
later.
can, yeah.
We don't disclose
Okay.
valuation, but it was pretty large.
All right.
We're today like the most valued or the
I,
most
I
valuable
can imagine in the Maghreb at least.
startup, no, in the whole North Africa, Egypt included.
That was the voice of Noureddine Tayebi, co-founder of Yassir.
I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region.
Today my guest is Noureddine Tayebi. Noureddine Tayebi is the co-founder of Yassir. Yassir started in 2017 in Algeria as a ride-hailing app and has since expanded in many ways. It's expanded its services, going into delivery and payment and other things, and is soon becoming a super app. And it's also expanded its operation into different countries in Africa. It's growing at such a huge clip over the last 5 years that it's also needed to raise over $190 million. The latest amount of which was $150 million that were announced last month from global investors. Noureddine has an interesting background. He studied engineering in his home country of Algeria before traveling to Silicon Valley, where he spent a long time getting 3 masters in different fields of engineering and management, as well as getting a PhD from Stanford. He's worked as both an entrepreneur and in the corporate world in Silicon Valley, gained a lot of experience, and come back to Algeria to set up Yassir and invest that experience in the home country and in the home region of the wider Arab world. It's been a wide-ranging and very interesting discussion with Noureddine, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have.
Now, here's our interview. Today, I'm very excited for this podcast because I have Noureddine Tayebi with me, and there are several reasons why I'm excited. I mean, this guy, he has a PhD from Stanford, 3 master's degrees, over 50 patents and publications, and a couple of startups under his belt in Silicon Valley. And he lived in Silicon Valley for, I think, 15 years. And yet he came back to Algeria, his home country, to do a startup. So that's one reason I'm very, I love the guy already without even speaking to him before. And the second reason is the scale of the ambition, because I really love the fact, and I want to always propagate this idea that we should have, the highest possible ambitions, starting startups from our region. And really, his vision with Yassir is actually very much in that vein. So without further ado, welcome, Noureddine.
Thank you, Ali, for having me. A really great pleasure to be with you, and hopefully the listeners will enjoy the discussion too.
I'm sure they will. So maybe we can just, start with an easy easy question about, how you came into the world of startups.
Uh-huh.
How did you end up here?
Oh, a series of accidents, I guess. Nothing planned. So you'll laugh, but kind of like my objective at some point was to become like a university professor. So didn't have in mind to become an entrepreneur at all. I think what made it so I was born and grew up in Algeria, so I got my engineering degree from there. And as I said, the goal was to become a university professor, and to do that, you have to get a PhD. So I
Mm-hmm.
applied for grad school in the U.S., and that's how I actually made it to the U.S. But ended up at Stanford. And as you know, like Stanford is kind of like the birthplace of Silicon Valley.
Yep.
Actually, like if you look at like really staggering numbers, like in terms of like the impact of that university on the high tech entrepreneurship scene worldwide, not just like in the US or in Silicon Valley. I remember
Indeed.
there was a study back in 2014 or 2015 that came up that showed that over 40,000 companies were created by Stanford alumni since the 1950s. And these companies not only employ 6 million people, over 6 million people today, but generate around $3 trillion in revenues. So if that was a country, it would be the sixth largest economy in the world, which is huge. I mean, this is
Incredible.
one institution. So really, I mean, like as I was doing my grad school, like, it was contagious. I mean, like everyone was talking about building things, and of course, like you see the success stories that were coming out, and yeah, it was just addictive, to be honest. Addictive in a sense that when you're in an environment that pushes you forward,
Hmm.
you kind of subconsciously do it. And two, like the fact that you see the impact of what you're building immediately, I think is like very rewarding. So yeah, really kind of like the backstory story, but like I didn't do it honestly, like directly out of,
Grad school.
once I got my PhD. Yeah, I did have a corporate experience at Intel for many years, but that
Mm.
corporate experience actually was extremely helpful because it was it was startup like, which allowed me to actually learn quite a bit. So I was part of a division called Intel Labs, which is the R&D
Yep.
division of Intel.
I work
And
for
the way it
Intel too, by
worked,
the way.
okay,
So yeah, I
and the
mean,
way it actually, yeah, the way it worked actually was like it started with small teams, like basically pitching an idea to upper management,
hmm,
and if like the idea was accepted, it would get funded, and if the idea grows into a proof of concept, like it gets more funding, the team gets bigger, and at some point like it actually becomes a product and can be commercialized. So I got lucky to actually go through the whole process. It was like a really great learning experience. And so it's then like I felt like I was ready to actually jump off the cliff and build something of my own. And yeah, so I got the chance to build a team, raise funds, take things to the next level. And that was the best experience I've ever had in my life, to be honest. Like the level of, like when you're facing problems and you're always facing the wall, it's just, as they say, like a necessity of the mother of all inventions.
hmm,
So you always, try to find solutions.
yep.
Uh,
Was that like your first startup that you founded there? Or
yeah, yeah.
no, I think you founded two, right? Were they in? I guess they weren't in the consumer space. They were closer to your original,
Yes,
right?
true. Yeah. So my background is in engineering, more like electrical and computer engineering,
Hmm.
and the solutions were actually completely like hardware slash software solutions, complete verticals that we were integrating. It was actually like a lot more complex. I mean, like if you look at that company, what we were building, I mean, the core of the technology was these motion sensors that were highly sensitive, that were built based on nanotechnology, and were super small, consuming little power. So we were building these arrays, like tens or hundreds of thousands of these that were connected, and data was collected by very intelligent software that was taking real-time decisions. And yeah, the applications were mainly P2P for warehouses, hospitals, and other use cases. So yeah,
Interesting.
it was actually very challenging, but
Challenging.
very rewarding actually. Like once we got it to work,
Yeah. And what happened to that company?
it got acquired uh,
Oh,
by another Silicon Valley company.
okay.
Uh,
And what kind of made you decide to move back to Algeria, and how did Yassir came about?
it
Come
wasn't
about,
planned
sorry.
at all.
Yeah.
It was not at all planned. I honestly like never thought I would go back to the region. What happened is that at some point I started getting involved in the nascent high tech entrepreneurship, not just like in Algeria, to be honest. I mean, like in the whole North Africa, Egypt included. But initially, it was in a passive way. So I would mentor teams. Sometimes I would even like write small checks for teams that I liked. But to be honest with you, I mean, like very quickly, I came to realize that the biggest problem in the region wasn't lack of funding or bureaucracy, because people always brought up these as the biggest problems. To me, the bigger problem was the entrepreneur, him or herself. And what I mean by that is really the mindset, lack of best practices, lack of values, lack of ambition, and kind of like pushed me to conclude that if I was serious about doing anything, I should get involved myself, really with the goal to at least attempt to build the local success model that would be emulated by others. And to be honest, I mean, like, to me, the best way to learn is by doing. I mean, you're not going to be learning entrepreneurship like on a board. You have to actually have the you have to jump off the cliff and do things, and that's how you learn. Yeah, that was really the objective. The second objective was also to empower the local talent and more so the engineering talent. In our region, unfortunately, a lot of the engineering talent doesn't have many opportunities and ends up leaving primarily to Europe to pursue further studies or find jobs. And so wanted to really prove that the local talent could build platforms, very large scale platforms that could go global. So it was really mission driven. And then the business model is another story.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about that. I mean, and the
Uh-huh.
business idea itself. I mean, how it started.
Yeah, so the decision, to go back was there, but then what would be the business model? And literally started with an anecdote. I was visiting a very good friend of mine who owns one of the largest juice companies in the region, and while I was in his office, this guy comes in. Turns out this guy owned one of the biggest distribution companies for agri-food products in Algeria. And so discussion with him was super interesting. I mean, turned out that this guy like barely had any education, literally like an elementary school dropout. If you look at like the company that he was able to build, the processes, it was pretty impressive. And what's really actually caught my attention is that they were doing all the transactions in cash. I mean, these are like big volumes. I mean, like you're talking about like maybe the equivalent of like millions of dollars on a daily basis, and they were
Wow.
all done in cash. To the point that they would actually not count the bills. They would actually weigh the money. So they would know, say, for instance, how much like $1 million weighs and the volume is, and that's how they would do it. And to me, I'm like, if there's so much cash out there, if one can tap into it, it could be a huge opportunity. So started digging further into it, and the use of cash, wasn't unique to this guy or to this company. I mean, if you look at like Africa in general today, has a little over $3 trillion in GDP. 72% of it is in the informal market in cash transaction. And even if you look at consumer expenditure, about $2 trillion is expected to double up actually in the next few years, and most of it is in cash transaction in the informal market. And if you look at like why cash, is not because of a lack of a banking system. Banks are everywhere. It's just that people don't trust it. And the number one reason people, I mean, we need to say it, it's actually tax evasion. People don't want to see that traceability. And so that trickles down to the consumer. The consumer is like, why do I need to have a bank account and pay monthly fees if at the end of the month I have to withdraw all the cash to buy my milk or bread? And so what was interesting in the region we currently operate in, like the Maghreb region, and to a lesser extent, like also West Africa, on-demand services that we all know about around the world, like ride-hailing, food, grocery delivery, it was pretty much in existence. And when we looked at the statistics, most people were spending their money. If you look at like the household spending, it was pretty much in transportation and food. Transportation because you have very big cities with very high density population, and transportation is archaic. I mean, just look at Cairo, Algiers, Casablanca. They all have the same issue. And food, the average family size, just like if you just take North Africa, is around 6 people. And so a lot of mouths to feed. And so 80% of household salary actually goes into transportation and food. And so we were like, why don't we use on-demand services that solve important and immediate needs? And of course, if we execute well, we could have a very large user base that subconsciously trusts us. And really key here is trust. And because on-demand services are really aggregators, it will give us access to most of the cash that is actually circulating. And what's cool about this business model is that on-demand services are multi-sided marketplaces. So when you start offering payment services, you're not just offering them to your customers. You have the supply, who are the drivers and the couriers. You have the merchants that are working on your platform. Today, we connect FMCGs, wholesalers, distributors, producers to the merchants. So it's a whole virtuous circle that we actually created through this. And so when you offer payment services, you're touching everything. And when I say offer, it's not just like in terms of really like selling the service to all the sides of the marketplace. You could leverage them too. So for instance, something we're doing today is that we're using the drivers and the couriers as mobile agents to collect the cash and transfer it into electronic money. So yeah, it's a whole ecosystem that we've built through the execution. And that was kind of like the business model from day one. It just that, when we started executing, of course, we had to build it one block at a time.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, I was reading the recently published Forbes article about Yassir, and they mentioned, like, they were telling the story from beginning to end, so to speak, to now, not to the end. We were still at the very beginning, but for the first 4 or 5 years, and they said that you bootstrapped, you and your co-founder at the beginning, and then at 8 months in, you were profitable. And I was like, what? In this industry with its notorious unit economics problems and things like that. So I'd love to understand more how that can be.
So as I mentioned to you earlier, like the region we were operating in was pretty much virgin. So we had first mover advantage, and we were the only player on the market. And three things helped us quite a bit on the unit economics. One is the cost of acquisition was pretty low because, as I mentioned, like it was really like a strong product market fit. If you look at the US, for instance, 89% of households have cars. If you take a country like Algeria, it's about like 10% of the households have cars. And public transportation is archaic. So the product market fit was there. So as soon as we started, like, we were getting, like very high adoption. And the cost of acquisition was around like 75 cents when, like the average order value was around like $6. Like, like if you take our commission, like we were pretty much, like entering in our investment, like, like once we were converting the user. And because there was that product market fit, like we didn't have any competition too. Like the unit economics were super healthy. Like we didn't have to like crazy discounts or anything like that. And that allowed us to be profitable very quickly. And we were reinvesting actually that money as soon as we were getting it to actually expand very quickly into new cities, working on new products. So that really helped us quite a bit. The second thing that really helped us is because of the low cost of living in the region we operate in. Like our salary mass wasn't that big. We had like great talents, and at the same time, like we weren't spending much on the team. So that helped us too towards profitability, and we were actually cash flow positive. I think like within the first year and a half. So it was very healthy. And then the third one, which I kind of like alluded to, is the CAC that we were having that was super low. That just made it work well.
Interesting. But then at some point, quite early, you decided that you do actually want outside capital. So what made you decide that? I mean, when did you know that you needed that?
Well, I mean, like a few reasons. I mean, like you also need to look at the scale of your growth. At some point, you need to grow not just like very quickly, I mean, like exponentially, but you need to do it at scale. And to be able to do that, I mean, just like your product ambitions become very important. I mean, like we're building, like a ride-hailing platform, a food delivery platform, a grocery delivery platform, and a payment platform. It's huge. It's like your engineering team, like to be able to focus and actually roll out features very quickly. is an undertaking, and so you have to have like a very large engineering and product teams. So just the salary mass associated with that is huge. And so irrespective of like how fast or like how exponential your growth is, you're not going to be able to absorb that cost. So fundraising becomes important. Two is really even like consolidating growth in the existing markets needed more capital, opening new cities, getting more out of your user, building like a very strong commercial strategy, that needed that more capital. And then the third one, we always were ambitious from day one, and we didn't think say like the Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia markets were enough for us. So we always wanted to expand into new markets and show that not only we're not dependent on a few markets, but also have that ambition of being a global player. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll
And of
come
course,
back to
when
that. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was saying, like, and when you raise funds, like you make the case for that, right? I mean, like you show that you
Yeah.
have the plan, you have the financial simulations that back it up, and of course, based on like what we've been executing too. And that's I think the tipping point, like when it comes to investor investment.
Absolutely. And I'll come back to that expansion part of your strategy. But
Mm,
while we're still on funding, there was something that intrigued me, which is that
mm,
you guys, I think, joined YC in 2020, right?
mm-hmm,
You were already, I mean, quite advanced in your
mm-hmm,
journey.
mm-hmm.
What made you do that?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
made
we
you
got
make
that
that
question.
decision? Yeah.
Look, as much as I had a large network in Silicon Valley, and like I knew a lot of partners like in the biggest funds of Silicon Valley, it was always hard for us to actually raise money, simply because the region wasn't known. So we always had, like two kinds of responses. One is, look, we know you, we like you, but like we have no clue about the region. It's too risky for us. We're not gonna take it. Or, okay, we know you, we like you. You're building something good. We need to take some time to actually build conviction. And so yeah, initially, honestly, like it was always painful to raise money,
Hmm.
irrespective of like the network I had, and the numbers, at least the initial numbers that we had. I mean, like we weren't at the scale we're at now, to the
Yeah.
point that like we couldn't be ignored. But it was the case. So with YC, like kind of like the spin that we thought about, and actually like took us a long time to make that decision. And if
Mm.
you talk to the YC partners, they'll tell you that like we didn't give them an answer to join till like I think the day before
Oh.
the program started. uh, YC brings up like so many things with it. Credibility, reputation. Beyond that, actually, like huge network of potential partners all around the world.
Yep.
By the way, it's not
Yep.
just like US based. Uh, the kind of support that you get, like from top notch founders and partners. I mean, it was just like the whole suite that came with it that just like really pushed us to conclude that it was the right decision, and we were right on the money, to be honest. Right after YC, like it became like a lot easier to raise funds. The partnerships, the perks that we got, like were like really of like huge impact on our growth. So yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, like going back, I would have done it again, to
You
be
still
honest.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's, coming out of YCs when you raised your seed round, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we did have some funding before that, but it wasn't
Yeah.
at the level
That was needed.
that we did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm guessing like the Algerian ecosystem, there aren't any like local venture capital firms that you could depend on, right? You had to
No,
look outside.
no, exactly. I mean, from day one, actually, that was one of the like initially, like I wanted to be like a purist, so I wanted even the funding to come from the region.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I mean, although like there aren't, like any VC firms, I started reaching out, like to people that could actually fund, but like no one was interested. Like actually, like no one was buying it. Like they're like, like you're just wasting your time.
Yep. Yep. Totally.
uh, and yeah, so I had to go back and tap into my network to be
Right.
able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, what you went through.
Yeah.
So I mean, while since we were just talking about your expansion, I was
Uh,
saving that question for later,
uh,
but you brought it
uh,
up. I'm just amazed by the scope of your expansion. So you guys are opening up in different countries and
uh,
simultaneously working on adding new services,
mhm,
uh, and that's, I mean, people don't typically do that. They typically either go deep first and then start wide, or they
mhm,
go wide. But
mhm,
you've been very early on in your in the
yeah,
story. You've been going to Morocco,
uh,
Tunis, etc. So I mean, what's the thought process that went behind that? Why did you adopt this strategy?
Look, there are two elements. One is the competitive landscape. So you really want to, like have that first mover advantage and grab as much as possible share wise. So it was really important that, like we expand in as many cities and at least, like regionally, like in the Maghreb region between Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, and establish ourselves as, like an, like strong player to reckon with. So that was extremely important. And then like in terms of like the multi-product offering, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, like it was from day one our ambition to go there to ultimately get into the payment services. So it was really important for us that we build that ecosystem of interdependent services. But what was good for us actually is that like our first market, which was Algeria, kind of like became the lab for these products. So we would not, like launch them, like simultaneously in all the geos. We would make sure that we roll it out, like we understand how things work. We build our playbook, and then transplant it into other geos.
Hmm.
So the combination of the two just like made it like a lot easier because Algeria was kind of like an like totally acquired market for us. So even if we had missteps, like we would
Hmm.
still be fine, if you see what I mean.
Yep. Yep.
um, and so really allowed us to understand things, iterate very quickly, and just plow through it, and just be bullish.
Right.
I think as entrepreneurs, like we really need to like to have that level of risk, of course, calculated, but it's that risk that usually like allows us to succeed one way or another.
Right. So kind of expanding geos was about not ceding market share to players who were moving into the other geos, and
Exactly.
making sure you have that. And the product expansion was really about the strategy of the company and what you needed to execute on. And you
Exactly.
always had Algeria as a stronghold, and that was kind of how you did that. And I'm so how did it go? How did the story go? Did it go kind of Algeria ride hailing in Algeria, and then ride hailing in Morocco and Tunis, etc., and then
Correct.
starting the new one more product, and then adding that to the other
Exa-
countries, and doing that
exactly. Yeah,
over and over?
totally. That's
Wow.
how it happens.
That
Yeah.
must have been very challenging to execute.
Yeah, too. And we also had COVID in the middle, so, which
Oh yeah,
didn't make things easier.
right.
We were actually pretty lucky that
Yeah,
uh, we launched the food delivery service in Algiers in November 2019. And it
right.
was like a very basic product. It was like actually like it had a lot of issues,
Hmm.
and we were just like trying to understand things both from a product but also like from a user point of view. And
Hmm.
then February came and we started seeing what was happening in China,
Lockdowns.
and even like
Yeah.
Europe started being hit, and we were like, if we don't do anything now, like we're gonna be in big trouble. So we took the risk to actually launch food delivery in multiple cities simultaneously by March 2020. And
Wow.
that was a lifesaver, because all of a sudden, like we had all this user base that wasn't going home, I mean, wasn't going out from home,
Yep.
but needed food, right?
Yep.
We also had like these drivers that like no longer
Needed money.
were
Uh-huh.
giving rides, and so needed to work. And then you had all these merchants, or like restaurants that needed to make
Business.
money too.
Yeah.
And so it was really the best time to actually educate everyone,
Yeah.
without actually costing us much. And so that allowed us to keep growing through COVID. And then when 2021 came, and things got better in the region, we really got good at cross-selling between the products, and getting the most out of each user that we had,
Nice.
and kept that momentum going till now.
Right.
Yeah.
And what have been the biggest challenges? I mean, operating in a place, in a country like Algeria or Morocco, as opposed to what the kind of challenges that would meet a startup in the US, since you've done both.
Mhm.
How is it different?
Uh, Different at many levels, to be honest. And to me, like the biggest difference, and I would say like the biggest challenge, is the mentality of the people in our region. Um, there are two things that I feel like are big impediments. One is the lack of ambition, and two is the lack of attention to details. The rest, honestly, I mean, like if you have like folks that have these two qualities or two values, like everything is surmountable. Bureaucracy, kind of like execution on the ground, like uh, so to me, honestly, I mean, and it's still today, like unfortunately we have to say it, it's the quality of the talent that you get. And it's honestly, I don't blame people. It just, our educational system pushes people to be like that. Our work environment, like the industry in itself, like pushes people to be around that. Always, like having someone on top of you, micromanaging you, kind of inhibiting, your creativity and
Yeah, your agency.
attention to yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, being able to actually hire folks and identify these values and qualities in them was the most challenging thing. And as you
Mm.
grow, doing it at scale, it was even more challenging. So till today, to be honest. Yeah.
Interesting. And I'm contrasting that with something you mentioned in, I think, the TechCrunch article,
Mm,
which is that you want to hire 100% of the technical talent from the region.
mm,
So
yeah.
how have you balanced these two, things against each
Yeah,
other? This challenge.
it's not easy,
Yeah.
and actually, so we got to a point where it's getting super hard to get talent in from the region. And I'm not even talking about quality. I mean, even talking about quantity. We became the largest software developer in the whole Maghreb region within 3 years, which, like in one way, like we're of course proud of, but at the same time, we're not that big of a team. Just to tell you, like how underdeveloped the region is.
Yep.
What we started doing, like as I was alluding to it earlier, is that a lot of the talent ends up leaving the region to pursue further studies or find jobs elsewhere, and primarily in Europe. So now we're actually tapping into that talent that is from the region, that's like left and went to Europe and is working now like with the big tech companies in Europe, uh,
Hmm.
that identifies with the mission, that sees that we actually are building something strong, and like there is really an objective, a mission, and a strategy and execution behind it. And yeah, so we're like, for us, we're doing the other way around. Like we're actually bringing people back,
Yep. Yep.
and these are like experienced people that have already done it before, which like in like the industry we work in, it's super important to have like folks that have
Absolutely.
done it before. At some point, like especially if you are in the growth stage, you don't have the time to reinvent the wheel. You need to have folks that
Yep.
boom, like from day one, come in and execute.
Yeah. Get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So you're kind of hiring the younger version of you. I mean, a younger youth, kind of. getting them to
I don't
join
know. Yeah,
you. Yeah,
I don't know if it's like a version of me, but yeah,
yeah,
we're
like people who went abroad
yeah,
to be, and
like
gained
yeah.
experience on how to get things done. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because honestly, I mean, like one has to say it, 99.99% of the people are still attached, like to their region or to their home country. It's just that they didn't have opportunities or, like a model in which they identify
absolutely.
with and can contribute. So honestly, like when they see that offer, like you could see that the barrier is far much lower. I mean, of course they think about it, but um, they're very attracted
Yep,
by the idea.
I can imagine.
Mm.
Okay. I wanted to ask you now, I mean, going to the market and the marketing aspect. I mean,
Mm.
it just seems to me, I mean, you don't have a two-sided marketplace, you have a multi-sided marketplace. You have, consumers, merchants, drivers,
Yeah.
many other people. So, I mean, how do you get the messaging right? How do you communicate to all these people effectively?
Uh,
How do you manage that?
yeah, really, like the brand becomes super important. Um,
Mm,
uh, so, so we built that brand from day one, and kind of like the image that we were giving. Of course, you take it from the name of the company, Yassir,
hmm.
which means like in
Easy.
Arabic, easy.
Yeah.
So mission statement is as simple as making the lives of our people easy while infusing social values through our products. And like three key terms like you find in the mission, which we hammered like in terms of brand building. The first one is our people. So we always made sure to, put ourselves as this local champion, from the region to the region.
Hmm.
Uh, the second one is making people's life easy, and like we were always choosing products that were actually solving real problems on the ground, and then infusing social values. The fact that like you use your phone, I don't know, to order a ride or food or groceries, and where like cash is primarily used, you're subconsciously actually building trust among people. And that mission-driven brand building was really key to acquire all the sites of the marketplace as quickly as possible. Add to it, of course, we had product market fit. The combination of the two made us grow very quickly with little cash and be able to have like very very sound unit economics.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you really focused on building brand,
yeah,
and then that makes the follow up easier. So when somebody from your team walks into a merchant's place, telling them about this here, they already know what it's about, and how it can serve them, and trust it in a way, and that
exactly.
kind of makes
Yeah.
everything
Yeah,
follow
yeah, yeah.
through
And then
easier.
and then it snowballs, right? I mean, like you have a viral effect, and people start talking about you, and yeah.
Right.
And
So.
I must say that the story of kind of like a founder with Silicon Valley experience coming back to the region does help quite a bit. And we leverage that as much as we could. I mean, you can see it, of course, like in all the PR that we do.
Mhm.
It's always something that comes back, which is honestly like 1,000% true. But it
Yep.
also helps like in terms of
Yeah.
growth. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to use it if it's effective, especially as
mm,
long as it's true.
mm,
Okay, so I can imagine. I mean, generally speaking, your business is pretty tough on the. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles that you have to
mm.
pass, and I can imagine that Algeria wasn't that easy. I mean, how did you go through? Tread through that uh, situation. The
Uh,
regulatory
yeah, yeah, yeah.
environment and
So
government
it's
affairs.
it's it's a, honestly it was the same play. Like we're a local champion. We're not just here to sell a product or a service. We're on a mission,
Hmm.
and the mission to empower the local talent and most of the engineering talent. and the um, the decision makers like understand that, because brain drain is a big issue in
Yep.
like in
North
the whole
Africa.
Maghreb region.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, I mean, like in most of the Arab world,
Yeah.
and like just take a country like Algeria, which is about 45 million population. You have easily like 4 or 5 million that are primarily in France, and these
Yep.
are like primarily doctors, engineers that couldn't find opportunities in the region and end up leaving. I mean, now like today, say for instance, you go to Paris, like any of the biggest hospitals, like all the
Yep.
doctors are pretty much Algerian. Same
Yep.
thing with engineers, like you find them everywhere.
Yep.
And so, yeah, brain drain was a big issue to them. They saw like we were on a mission. Again, it did help uh, that they were seeing someone that succeeded somewhere else, like had like like a very big experience in kind of like the hub of high tech. Um, and yeah, the story of like we're on a mission. Look at like how many indirect jobs that we created beyond like the engineering talent that we're attracting, just made them listen to us. And they understood
Yeah.
that there were legal vacuums and that it was in the interest of everyone, including them, especially in terms of fiscality or like taxes, that we would work together and find solutions to these legal vacuums.
Right. So you were proactive in engaging them. You didn't use the kind of Uber
Oh yeah, yeah.
method of ask for
Yeah,
forgiveness later. Just go for it and ask for forgiveness. You didn't go for that.
yeah. No, no, we did.
You
It
did.
was a
Okay.
combination of the two. It was doing the two simultaneously. But it was part of the execution. It wasn't like so we got to a point now we have to do it. No, it was from
Right.
day one. It was part of the playbook.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
which we repeat in each geo, by
In
the
each
way.
country, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
So you hire
And we do
engineers in
hire.
Morocco and
Yeah,
Tunis.
yeah. We hire engineering talent in each country we operate in. I mean, even
Hmm.
today, like we have operations in Senegal, so we have engineering talent in Senegal as
Nice.
well. It's part of the mission, really. But it also helps building, like that local champion position.
Yep.
Mm.
Okay. So going back to the fundraising aspect, I mean, it's
Mhm.
important to have the right VCs like next shoulder to shoulder with you on this
Mhm.
journey of yours. So
Mhm.
how did you choose the ones you ended up working with? How did you approach them?
Yeah.
Uh, how did you prepare for that?
Well, I mean, there are two things. Of course, like in a fundraising process, you talk to as many firms as possible. So you kind of, like keep all your options
Yep.
open. And once you start getting traction, usually you kind of like narrow down like the number of firms that you want to carry on. And personally, I have like a simple test. Like the partners I talk to, uh, I'm like, are these people that I want to go to lunch with or not? Like, are these, like
Mm.
people that I want, like I would enjoy a conversation with or not?
Yep.
And really, I mean, like as simple as that. And I mean, like if you look at our investors today, especially the major ones, uh, we have affinity towards one another. Like when we see each other, we're happy.
Hmm.
We hug each other.
Right.
Like if we go for a coffee or lunch, like we share food in like the same plate.
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't mean that, of course, like we all have fiduciary responsibilities and like we have to work towards
Yep. Of
those.
course.
But that importance of like having that personal connection to
Yeah.
me is worth like all the money in the world, to be honest. And it definitely was a criterion
Hmm.
in the decision making at the end. So,
Any other criteria?
uh, uh, well, I mean, of course, like how much you were raising, valuation,
Evaluation, terms.
the terms, and honestly, like it also goes back to the quality of the investors that you have.
Yep.
If you look, for instance, at like the last term sheet that we got, um, like in
November.
the fundraising that we had,
Right.
it was the cleanest term sheet I've ever seen in my life, and we didn't have to
Nice.
negotiate, to be honest.
Oh, interesting.
And to me, uh, that
Special.
was like worth, yeah, worth, like like anything
Mm.
that
I mean,
any
it's a
other
very good
maybe
sign
firm could. Yeah,
for the relationship in the future.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and people I think discount to what extent business relationships are human relationships, and
Oh
how
yeah,
it's important it is to get that chemistry right between
yeah,
the
yeah.
people who are working on it.
Exactly. Look, I mean, we tend to complicate things, and we think that like the more complex, the better it should be. But
Hmm.
honestly, at the end of the day, it's actually like we need to make things simple. And
Right.
the way like our fathers and grandfathers did things, it was just like a handshake, and like trusting one another.
Yep. Yep.
That's how we should do things here. And to be honest, I always tell people, it's like even if your trust is betrayed by someone, uh, one should not stop trusting others,
Right.
because like if like as soon as we start doing that, like we fail as a society.
Yep.
uh, and so yeah,
And there's
I'm
so
still
much
like old
overhead and
school.
so much time lost and so much,
Exactly. Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
speed of trust is not to be messed with.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm honestly like very old school when it comes to that, and I'm gonna continue to be. I think, to me, honestly, like it's an important value, and people
Hmm.
always think that like because you're doing tech, that you should not be old school.
Right.
I don't see them as mutually exclusive. On the
Yeah.
contrary. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you raised like two very large rounds after each other. November 2021, you raised $30 million, and now
Mhm.
it's $150 million in the last round last month.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, can you tell me what the valuation was for the $150 million round?
So actually the closing happened before, like we announced
I
later.
can, yeah.
We don't disclose
Okay.
valuation, but it was pretty large.
All right.
We're today like the most valued, or the
I,
most
I
valuable
can imagine in the Maghreb at least.
startup, no, no, in the whole North Africa, Egypt included,
Okay.
and one of the most valuable actually in the whole. I would say like even EMEA region, like
Right.
Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
And
So
I
so
can
yeah.
imagine just sorry, go ahead.
No,
Go
so I
ahead.
mean, like we're very strong, honestly, today.
Congratulations.
And what makes me happy is the fact that we've done it, like locally. And um, to
Yeah.
me, like I did believe in the dream initially, but I also sold the dream. Um, and when I see team members, like working like super late at night, like 1, 2 a.m., like preparing for the day after, and the drive is really ambition, nothing else. Like,
Hmm.
trying to make that dream reality.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And like when I see these guys, I'm
That,
like, I
that's
cannot fail them.
energizing.
So, no, honestly, like I'm stuck. I cannot fail them.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
yeah. And the other thing also,
Well,
like we don't see much, although like it's changing now. Like we give like equity to our team members, and like today, about like 15% of the total shares of the company go to the team members, which I think
yeah.
is super important. Like anyone that's participates in the success of something has to have a part of that success.
Um,
I'm a strong believer in that, and I'll never compromise when it comes to that.
I'm glad you mentioned it as well. So, because I really think it's important for the whole ecosystem in our region to understand the importance of giving equity to the team that
Oh yeah,
pulls these long lights and really
yeah,
is
yeah.
a part of actually the
Look, I mean,
reason
we all
behind the
succeed.
success.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
we all succeed
So thank
together
you
or
for
fail
mentioning
together.
that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the typical structure when VCs from the US, where it's a Delaware company and you have the subsidiaries and all that, of course. Just for our
Mhm.
listeners to understand, how things need to get done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. Of course, we can
yeah,
get into the organizational structure. And, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, speaking of people who are like there till 1 a.m., 2 p.m., I mean, you have teams in several geos. You have teams building several products at the same time. You have different functions reporting into you. I can imagine. Uh, how do you manage your time? How do you divide your time up?
Oh
What do
man,
you prioritize? How do you do that?
it's crazy. So my days start at like 5 a.m. and they can easily end at like midnight, 1 a.m. So just to tell you, like
Hmm.
today we're talking, I went to bed at 5:15 a.m. and my first meeting was at 7 a.m.
Ouch.
Just to give you an idea. So
Yeah.
yeah, like very busy schedule, and it's pretty much like this all year round. Um, um, of course, like you delegate as much as possible, and as you keep growing, you need to have like people that you can rely on. You identify like the most important functions, and you need to trust. Of course, like there are feedback loops and processes that like allows you to measure the growth or the success of like each team member or each team.
Hmm.
And these are like like OKRs and KPIs that we include even in our BI, so like they're very visible, and we can
Hmm.
like tell what's happening immediately, and if like something is not working, we can remedy to it like very quickly. And yeah, that's what it is. I mean,
So,
today, I mean, as you can imagine, like I'm involved in like a bunch of things within the company.
yep.
One is product and engineering, because I'm an engineer by background, so I tend to try to gravitate towards that
Hmm.
a lot, which I think is really important because uh, usually, like companies, and this is, like something that you see statistically, and like for instance, VC firms are like very aware of that. Most of the successful companies are like founder driven, uh,
Yep.
and uh, and to me, honestly, like product is like one of the most, if not the most important thing in the success of a business like ours. So that's something like I try to spend a lot of time in. Of course, fundraising takes a long time, and also investor relations,
Hmm.
operations, finance. Finance becomes like a super important aspect as you reach
Yep.
like that growth stage.
Yeah.
And of course, like legal, PR, marketing, like all these, like I tend to spend time and make sure that like we're on the right path to keep up with our growth and ambitions.
And what about recruiting?
Yeah, today, like one of my most major tasks is getting the C-suite right, and
Right.
it's no easy task.
I can
I
imagine.
mean, today, like I reserve maybe at least like 10 hours in a week in talking to candidates, reviewing candidates. These are like blocked in my calendar.
Yeah.
And this trickles down to everyone in the team. I always tell the team that irrespective of like how busy we are, we cannot compromise in the quality of the hiring that we do. And you can
Yep.
imagine, like we're at the growth stage, like we're hiring like 200 people a month, or if not more. And so being able to do both, to do it both quantitatively and qualitatively, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not simple.
Pretty difficult,
Yeah.
if not impossible. um,
Nothing is
so
impossible. I mean, that's how we
yeah,
push the limits of what's possible. So,
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. We have to push
Huh.
the limits basically,
No, seriously, that's how it
and
is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's like maybe recruiting is like 20% of your time, and product is a big block, and then the rest of the functions take the rest, right? That's how you divide your time more or less.
Yeah,
Sounds like it.
finance ops. Yeah, finance ops.
Yeah.
Like we're very surgical in the way we execute. We literally go, um, like we're not even city by city. We're district by district, and
Okay.
we look at like our penetration in each district, what's working, what's not working, um, and just like try to keep executing and achieving our growth.
Right.
So that level of details really requires a lot of work and a lot of coordination. Yeah.
I can imagine. So I mean, okay, you obviously have a very busy schedule.
Uh,
We're recording this on the 26th of December, so the day after
uh,
Christmas. You're in the US, so everybody's on holiday, but you
uh,
seem to be working. So I can imagine that's pretty, stressful managing a blitzscaling startup.
uh,
How do you handle stress? What do you do to relax?
Oh, I honestly, I don't have time. I don't have time to think about it. And I think part of it is really like when you enjoy what you're doing, like you don't count the hours. The stress is there, definitely.
Hmm.
But like when you enjoy what you're doing, it just like it's the best medicine or the best remedy to it.
Yeah,
And yeah, you just
yeah,
need to be, like goal driven, I think.
yeah. I mean, reflecting on what you're saying, I mean, I think that when when work is fun,
Mhm.
then it's not stress per se. It's
Exactly,
actually like
exactly.
almost like
Yeah,
playing a sport. It has that
yeah,
aspect of it. You know,
yeah,
the aspect of achieving and maybe scoring a goal while you're playing football or something is actually fun.
yeah.
So and the striving to score and all that is also meaningful and kind of drives that. And I think in the early stages of startups this tends to be the pattern, right? Maybe one day, when you IPO, you'll have a COO who takes care of some of the functions and someone
Uh-huh.
else, taking, but and you can delegate
Oh,
more.
it's already happening now, to be honest. I mean, like we
Yeah,
need to, yeah. I mean,
yeah, but
it has nothing to do with IPO. It just like the scale of things
scale.
is just, yeah, yeah. You need to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I salute you. So, okay, I mean, just zooming out a bit to the Arab region and the Arab world in general, do you see any areas that have the most opportunity, areas where you think startups could be successful in the future?
Uh, in terms
That
of
doesn't
business
necessarily have
model,
to do
or
with Yassir.
in terms of business model, you mean?
In terms, yeah, business model
Oh
or
man, there is so much to do in our region. Honestly, I mean, like I still see it as virgin. Whether that be, like in North Africa or Middle East, and including GCC countries, we're really
Mhm.
scratching the surface. And I think, like a lot of the countries now, are, at least, like the big ones, are, becoming aware of the importance of building these local champions, because, look, I'm not saying, it's wrong to let, like big players coming from the West into our region. Of course, like it's always good to have that know-how and level of competition, honestly, that brings you up. But we really need to, like push for more local champions to emerge, and also protect them and make sure that, like they succeed. I mean, this is what happened all over the world. I mean, you
Yep,
see it like in China, you see it in
China.
Southeast Asia, in India, in
Yep,
Latin America, and now like these local champions have nothing to envy to, like the big players in the West.
yep,
We need to have that, and
absolutely.
uh, the region is just like so virgin that anything that you can pick up would work, as long as, you have the right team, and the right execution, and of course, like the right backers behind it. So
Okay, so I mean, before we start wrapping up, maybe a last long form question. Where do you see Yassir in 10 years' time? What do you think, you guys will be doing?
yeah, so we will be the largest technology company in our region, and we will be publicly listed with at least, like a $40 billion market cap.
Cool. And by the way, I mean, since it's a super app, will you be opening up the app to others to build on? Do you
Yeah, we
see that?
already,
You have that in your
yeah,
vision?
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're already actually working on that, getting, like APIs where, like
Yeah.
other players could just plug in into our platform and add their solutions. Yeah, totally.
Extremely cool.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah. So can I just ask you a few rapid fire questions?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. The first one is: are there any books you like to recommend to startup people?
Two books. One is by Andy Grove, who used to be the CEO and third employee of Intel,
Yep.
and is considered today, I mean, even if after he passed away a few years ago,
Yep.
to be the best manager Silicon Valley has ever seen.
Yep.
And he has this book called like Only the Paranoid Survive.
Yeah.
And it just tells you like, you know, like he tells his story through Intel and like the crazy decisions that he had to make, you know, like after like board meetings and like shifting
Hmm.
completely gear with the company, but also gives a lot of management advice, which honestly, that's what's missing today. Like we always
Yeah.
tend to romanticize things when we talk about entrepreneurship, but at the end of the day, we don't give solutions to real problems, to, you know, like
Hmm.
problems that, you know, like founders find like on a daily basis. And that book really like helps quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
Uh, a similar book too that kind of, you know, like solves that issue, more recent one, called The Hard Thing About
I
Hard
think.
Things,
Yeah.
written by Ben Horowitz, who's now like with Mark Andreessen, is a founding partner of Andreessen Horowitz and like
Yep.
early employee of Netscape and uh, CEO of the first cloud company
Yep.
in the world that was acquired by HP,
Hmm.
Loud Cloud. And it also details, you know, like a lot of these issues, like the do's and not do's, you know, like when
Yeah.
you're facing, you know, like very important decisions, like existential ones, and how you deal with them, the loneliness of being a founder, like waking up at like 2 a.m. and, you know,
Yep. Yep.
almost crying, it's like all these things, really like hands-on,
Yeah.
honestly advice, which I truly advise everyone to read. A third one, which I started reading actually a few days ago, and it
Hmm.
was offered to me by one of our investors. It's called Burn Rate,
Mm.
and it's like a journey of an entrepreneur, and, you know, like how to actually try to balance, you know, like your professional
Interesting.
and personal life, especially like as you go through the roller coaster of building, you know, like yeah,
Uh-huh.
a successful startup. Uh,
Interesting.
so I haven't finished it yet, but like it's very exciting so far.
You already see value out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, plus one to the first two. Both of them are incredible books. Of course, anyone who worked at Intel is affected by Andy and
Mm.
his management capabilities. And of course, the hard thing about hard things makes you feel like heard. Like he really,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's not. I'm not the only one going through this as a founder. Everybody else
Uh,
has as well. So
yeah, and
it's a
and
beautiful book.
if you don't want to read, and, you know, like you just want to do it also like in a fun way and enjoy watching something. I don't know if you've seen like the series Silicon Valley
Silicon Valley.
on
Yeah.
HBO. Like honestly, like if you're like in the startup world,
Yeah.
like it's really portrays kind
Yep.
of like your
And
day-to-day
it's so
life.
hilarious as well. So
I know. So you
yeah.
get so much fun out of it. So, yeah.
So I mean that this is a good segue to my next rapid fire question, which is how do you unwind and stay energized?
Family. Really, or especially spending time with the kids. It's you know, like when I see my kids, I'm like, you know, like I want them to live in a world where you know, like everyone has equal opportunity, irrespective of where they're coming from, irrespective of
Hmm.
what their ethnicity is, irrespective of whether they're female or male. And honestly, I mean, like they're my source of, you know, rest, inspiration, ambition, you name it. I really want them to live in such a world,
Yeah.
and just, you know, seeing them grow, do things, try to inculcate these values in them, as like it just brings, you know, like so much rest, honestly, and peace of mind
Yeah. Beautiful.
in
Hmm.
my hectic day-to-day life.
Okay, that's a beautiful answer. And the third question is, who do you think we should get as a guest on the podcast?
That's a tough one.
If you have any
Honestly,
suggestions.
like we have great entrepreneurs in the region that are emerging. Um,
Hmm.
One of them is Mustafa Amin from Breakfast
Yeah.
in Egypt. I really love the guy.
Yeah.
Like a lot of affinity with. There is Ismail Belkhayat from Morocco with a company called Shari, a B2B platform.
Hmm.
There are the Mexab folks,
Yeah.
Bilal and his
Bilal and
co-founder.
yeah.
Yeah, I really love the guys. There is Yasmin Abdel Karim from Yalla fi Sikka in Egypt as
Yep.
well, like building, like
YFS.
last mile logistics company that is,
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, like for like also to empower, like female entrepreneurs,
Yep. Yep.
I think is really important in the region.
Hmm.
So we need to, like push for more females to, to jump off the cliff and honestly, like fully support them to succeed. So yeah, so these are like the ones that come to
Yeah.
mind, but I'm sure,
I
like there
mean,
are
no, I'm
tons
sure.
that,
Yeah.
yeah,
But this is like an A-star team. I mean, these are all
yeah,
great people.
yeah, yeah.
And so, what should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Oh, I don't know. uh, One thing that I always, try to propagate.
Uh huh.
Um, um, I'm maybe a bit philosophical. Um, I'm an engineer by background, and the basis of any engineering education is, like science in general. Like all the sciences, whether that be math, physics, chemistry, you name it.
Yep.
And there's this like theory in physics, which I truly believe like it applies to people, to societies, to nations, to companies, and that's the theory of equilibrium, which simply states that like any entity is in equilibrium only when it reaches its state of minimum energy. And I
Hmm.
truly believe that, as I mentioned, it applies to communities, societies, nations, and companies. And what's say, like a community, society, nation, or a company that is in equilibrium? It's where actually, with a small effort, we can create a big impact.
Hmm.
And to me, what allows us to do that is the value system, or what we call like in anthropology, culture in a society.
Hmm.
Like from an anthropological point of view, culture is defined as like an ensemble of values that a person finds since birth, and uses it as a primary capital, and will actually define subconsciously
Yep.
the impact that person will have in his or her society. And so if you have like a strong value system that is built on not just like moral values. I mean, moral values are
Yeah.
important, of course,
What hard work?
but hard
Yeah.
work, ambition,
Right.
creativity, self-confidence,
Hmm.
uh, honestly, like the rest will come. Money will come, intelligence will come, and yeah, so we need to push for that. I think
Yeah.
like to me is really like key to the success of, like, you want to build a company, uh, build a strong value system in it.
Yeah.
Wherein with a small effort you're gonna have a big impact. You want to build a community, you want to build a society, you want to build a nation. That's what you need. And look
Here.
at all
Here.
the civilizations around the world. I mean, like since the beginning of humankind, really, what built civilizations wasn't money, wasn't uh, intelligence. It
Yeah.
was the value system,
Right.
and the rest will come with it. So,
Yeah. That's a great thought to end with.
yeah,
And I always like to end with a note of gratitude. First of all, thank you for spending the time. And
thanks.
secondly, to
Likewise.
ask you a closing question about, what is a gift that someone has given you in life that has had a positive effect on you?
Well, the value system that my parents gave me. I think that's the most valuable thing that, or the most valuable gift I've ever had. And like values, you live them, right? So
Yep.
it just kind of the model that that they were offering us as kids, and we saw them as growing. and also like the stories of the hardships that they've gone through their lives. I mean, I'm from Algeria, and like my parents grew up during the French colonization, and it wasn't easy for them. I mean, it wasn't, like education wasn't open to them the way it was open, like to French citizens. It was always hard. Sometimes because they were Algerians, they weren't allowed to get into things, or sometimes even risk to actually stop their education. But they persevered. I mean, they were ambitious. They always believed, like there was something better coming up. And just honestly, like to me, growing up in that environment, that was and being inculcated those values, that was the best gift that I could ever have.
Wonderful. It's always
Yeah.
wonderful to have a role model in life,
Yeah.
and a positive role model like that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Noureddine. It's been a great talking to you, and hopefully we'll see
Thanks.
you
It was
again sometime on
reciprocal.
the podcast. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, totally. And yeah, should be in Egypt very soon. So maybe we should
Wow,
we
great.
should catch
So, I
up.
mean, I have a reservation with you from now.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
We'll have some kushari together.
Inshallah. Great. Lots of sauce on it, hot sauce. All
All right.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali Zwail.